As diehard sports fans, we love everything about our team, and that causes us to consistently get in debates with family, friends, co-workers, random people on the street, etc. We even argue about things that have nothing to do with the sport, like having the best uniform. But it's just natural as a sports fan. We tend to love everything about our team, including the players. And one thing about college sports that is completely unique to professional sports is that we argue about players that don't even play for our team anymore. In the college football world, we consistently have debates on who has the best wide receivers in the NFL, who has the best quarterbacks in the NFL, who has the best cornerbacks in the NFL, etc. So today I'm going to be breaking down which school is really wide receiver U, and I'll give a top 5 ranking of the schools in which I think is wide receiver U. And the criteria I'm loosely basing it off of is quality NFL wide receivers in the last 20 years with an emphasis on the past 5 years. College production in the last 15 to 20 years. All-time wide receivers in the NFL and quantity of NFL receivers in the last 15 to 20 years. First, I want to start the video off with some honorable mentions. The first honorable mention school we have is the University of Maryland. And yeah, I know this might be a shock to some of you, but they're coming in at number 7th on the list because their top 2 receivers are just that good. First off, you look at a guy like Stefon Diggs, who was drafted in the year 2015. He was drafted by the Minnesota Vikings and eventually got traded to the Buffalo Bills, but since he's been in the league, he's had 3 Pro Bowls and 2 All-Pro teams. Not to mention, already has 8,000 receiving yards in his career. Diggs has consistently been in the top 5, top 10 wide receiver convo, and definitely in the convo for one of the best route runners in the NFL today. Maryland definitely had to make my honorable mention because they have a guy like Stefon Diggs and DJ Moore. I think DJ Moore is one of the most underrated wide receivers in the NFL today. He's been productive ever since he was drafted in the first round of the 2018 draft. And not to mention, this is the list of quarterbacks that he's played with ever since he's been in the league. The last player that we have to talk about for the University of Maryland is Torrey Smith. And yeah, Torrey Smith isn't on the caliber of player as a Stefon Diggs or DJ Moore. He only had one 1,000-yard season in his career, but he was a very impactful player on 2 Super Bowl teams, the 2017 Philadelphia Eagles and especially the 2012 Baltimore Ravens. Torrey Smith was a big-time deep threat that made plays in the playoffs. So, because of 2 number 1 receivers like Stefon Diggs and DJ Moore and a great deep threat like Torrey Smith, Maryland had to make my honorable mention for wide receiver U. The next school that made an honorable mention for wide receiver U had to be the Ole Miss Rebels. Ole Miss had to be in here because their top 2 wide receivers are all pros. Not a lot of schools can claim that. The first all pro that we need to talk about is A.J. Brown. A.J. Brown was originally drafted by the Tennessee Titans in the 2019 draft, and he played for the Titans up until 2021, where he was traded to the Philadelphia Eagles after the season. In 2022, he made his second Pro Bowl team and his first All-Pro team. The second All-Pro that we need to talk about from the Ole Miss Rebels is DK Metcalf. Now, DK Metcalf was not nearly as productive in college as A.J. Brown. Never got a 700-yard receiving season in college, nor did he ever make an All-SEC team, mainly because of the offense that he was in. But his traits allowed him to be drafted in the second round of the 2019 NFL Draft. And since then, Metcalf has been a reliable wide receiver, having over 4,000 yards in his career, a Pro Bowl appearance, and an All-Pro. The next wide receiver we need to talk about is Mike Wallace. Mike Wallace was drafted in 2009 by the Pittsburgh Steelers from Ole Miss in the 3rd round. Mike Wallace was in the league from 2009 to 2018. And throughout his career, he had 3 1,000-yard seasons and he made the Pro Bowl in 2011. He finished his career with 8,000 receiving yards, which is pretty good. The next wide receiver we need to talk about is Elijah Moore. Now, Elijah Moore spent his first 2 seasons in the NFL, 2021 and 2022, with the New York Jets. He was traded to the Cleveland Browns in the 2023 offseason. So far, he hasn't proven himself to be as good of a wide receiver as DK Metcalf or A.J. Brown, but he has proven himself to be a good player in the NFL. The last wide receiver for Ole Miss that we need to talk about is Laquan Treadwell. Now, Laquan Treadwell hasn't had the greatest NFL career in the world, but he did have a very good college career. First team All-SEC, 3rd team All-American, SEC Freshman of the Year, and he was a first-round pick. That definitely gives Ole Miss a boost on their wide receiver U resume. Overall, Ole Miss definitely deserved the honorable mention spot in my wide receiver U ranking. They have 2 top-tier NFL receivers and a bunch of other guys as well. It's pretty impressive for a team that's not known to be dominant in the SEC. The last honorable mention team that we have to talk about is the University of Miami. Now, Miami hasn't had an elite receiver in a long time. These 4 receivers right here were either drafted in the 80s or the 2000s. The early 2000s at that. But these 4 receivers were so freaking freaking good that you just have to put him in the honorable mention. The first wide receiver that we have to talk about is the playmaker Michael Irvin. I mean, what more needs to be said about Irvin? 3-time Super Bowl champion, 1-time first team All-Pro, 2-time second team All-Pro, 5-time Pro Bowl, 90s All-Decade team, Cowboys Ring of Honor, college football national champion, 1-time first team All-American, 1-time second team All-American, and a member of the Pro Football Hall of Fame. The next wide receiver we need to talk about is Andre Johnson. Andre Johnson, in my opinion, is a for sure Hall of Fame. Like, look at this. 2-time first team All-Pro, 2-time second team All-Pro, 7-time Pro Bowl, 1,062 catches, 1,400 receiving yards, and 70 touchdowns. And his numbers become even more impressive when you take a look at the quarterbacks that he played with from 03 to 2014. The next wide receiver that we need to look at is Reggie Wayne. Reggie Wayne was a staple on those 2000s Colts teams. He ended his career a 1-time Super Bowl champion, 1-time first team All-Pro, 2-time second team All-Pro, 6-time Pro Bowl, and he's in the Colts Ring of Honor. Not to mention, he's the Colts all-time leader in games played, and he got an all-Big East team with the Miami Hurricanes. Reggie Wayne also proved that he can produce without Marvin Harrison on the other side, and he also proved that he can produce without Peyton Manning throwing him the football. The last Miami wide receiver that we have to talk about is Santana Moss, the most underrated wide receiver out of all of them. Moss had a very good career in college and in the NFL, being second team All-Pro in 2005, making the Pro Bowl that year, being the 90 greatest players of the Washington Commanders, first team All-Big East, a consensus All-American, and 2000 Big East Offensive Player of the Year. Not to mention 10,000 receiving yards in the league. And what makes this impressive is that Santana did this with 13 quarterbacks with the Jets and with Washington. Miami definitely deserved a spot on this wide receiver U honorable mention. I don't care that these receivers haven't played in a long time. All 4 of these guys have over 10,000 receiving yards. All 4 of these guys have an All-Pro team. And at the end of the day, I think all 4 of these guys will be inducted in their team's Ring of Honor. And at the end of the day, I think 3 out of 4 of these guys will be inducted into the Pro Football Hall of Fame. Now, ranked number 5 on my wide receiver U list are the USC Trojans. USC has always had the stigma that their wide receivers don't pan out in the NFL. But if we're being honest, in 2023, they have a lot of quality wide receivers in the league right now. Do they have a bunch of elite blue chip wide receivers in the league? Probably not. But it's hard to find a lot of teams that have as many quality NFL wide receivers as USC. The first wide receiver I want to talk about is Amon-Ra St. Brown. St. Brown has been very productive so far in his short NFL career. He already has 2,000 receiving yards and he almost has 200 catches. His 2022 campaign, where he had over 100 catches and over 1,100 receiving yards, allowed him to get a spot in the Pro Bowl. Next wide receiver that I want to talk about is Juju Smith-Schuster. Juju Smith-Schuster has been a good player so far in his NFL career. He won the Super Bowl in the 2022 season with the Kansas City Chiefs, and he made the Pro Bowl in 2018. Not to mention, he made 2 All Pac-12 teams with the USC Trojans. And he's the youngest receiver in NFL history with 1,500 receiving yards. With almost 5,000 receiving yards in his career, I think Juju Smith-Schuster definitely helps boost the resume of USC as wide receiver U. The next USC wide receiver that we have to talk about is Robert Woods. Now, Robert Woods may have never made a Pro Bowl, but he's been extremely impactful in the NFL. You look at his career numbers: 7,000 receiving yards, 623 receptions, Super Bowl champion in the year 2021, a 3-time All Pac-12 player, and a consensus All-American in 2011. Now, the next wide receiver that we need to talk about is Michael Pittman Jr. In my opinion, Michael Pittman Jr. is an elite number 2 wide receiver and a decent number 1 wide receiver. Regardless, he's been a very good player in the NFL. In 3 seasons, he has 227 catches, 2,500 receiving yards, and 11 receiving touchdowns. And he was damn good in college as well. 2-time first team All Pac-12 and a 1-time second team All-American. The next wide receiver that we need to talk about is Drake London. Now, Drake London's only played 1 season in the NFL. So far, he's shown that he can definitely play in the big league. 866 receiving yards with suspect quarterback. Not to mention, he was a 2-time All Pac-12 player for the Trojans. And he was a top 10 pick in the 2022 NFL Draft. Those credentials definitely give USC a boost in their wide receiver U resume. The last active wide receiver that we have to talk about is Nelson Agholor. Now, Nelson Agholor has never had a 1,000-yard season in the NFL, but he's been a decent receiver. Probably hasn't lived up to the hype of being a first-round pick, but him being a first-round pick definitely adds to the resume of USC as wide receiver U. And he was also a 2-time All Pac-12 wide receiver. USC has also had other wide receivers like Marquise Lee, Dwayne Jarrett, Mike Williams, Steve Smith, the #1 overall pick Keyshawn Johnson, and the Pro Football Hall of Famer Lynn Swann. So when you look at these USC wide receivers in totality, you can see that currently they don't have a superstar wide receiver, but they have a lot of good wide receivers. And who's to say that Amon-Ra St. Brown or Drake London or a Jordan Addison might not become a superstar wide receiver? But right now, USC has a lot of good wide receivers in the NFL, and they have some legendary ones as well. So in totality, out of their current active wide receivers, they have 2 Pro Bowls, 12-time All Pac-12, 2-time All-American, and a 1-time Pac-12 Offensive Player of the Year. Those credentials right there is the reason why the USC Trojans are ranked number 5 on my wide receiver U list. Now, coming in at number 4 on my wide receiver U list are the Clemson Tigers. Clemson has to be included on this wide receiver U list based on the amount of quality wide receivers that they have in the NFL today. Now let me explain. First off, we have to talk about the best wide receiver of them all, DeAndre Hopkins. When you look at D-Hop's accolades, they're outstanding. 3-time first team All-Pro, 2-time second team All-Pro, 5-time Pro Bowl, first team All-ACC. He has 853 catches, 1,100 receiving yards, and he was a first-round pick. If he continues to stack up these numbers and he has another Pro Bowl season or 2, it's likely that D-Hop ends up being a Hall of Famer when it's all said and done. The next wide receiver that we have to talk about is T. Higgins. Now, T. Higgins doesn't have any Pro Bowls on his resume yet, but we all know that he's a Pro Bowl caliber receiver. He's the number 2 wide receiver for the Bengals right now, but we all know that he's a number 1 receiver. He's only been in the league for 3 years, and he already has 215 catches with 3,000 total yards. And on top of that, he's a 2-time All-ACC player and a college football playoff national champion. Having T. Higgins play wide receiver at your university definitely helps boost your resume as wide receiver U. The next wide receiver that we have to talk about is Hunter Renfrow. And Hunter Renfrow's NFL career so far, he's already made a Pro Bowl, has 244 receptions with 2,600 receiving yards. He's a 2-time national champion. He won the Burlsworth Trophy for the best walk-on in college football, and he made 3rd team All-ACC twice, and it seemed like he was at Clemson for about 10 years. Next wide receiver that we have to talk about is Mike Williams. Mike Williams was drafted 7th overall in the 2017 NFL Draft, and he had a slow start to his career, but Mike Williams has proven to be a quality NFL wide receiver. Doesn't have any Pro Bowls, but he has 4,600 receiving yards so far in his career, and he got a second contract from the Chargers. He has good college accolades as well. In 2016, he won a college football national championship, and he was first team All-ACC. The last wide receiver that we'll talk about in detail for the Clemson Tigers is Sammy Watkins. Now, Sammy Watkins was drafted with the 4th overall pick in the 2014 NFL Draft, and ever since he's been in the NFL, he struggled with injury, and he probably hasn't lived up to the 4th overall pick hype. But don't get it twisted, Sammy Watkins has been a good football player. So far in his NFL career, 364 catches with over 5,300 receiving yards. Not a bad NFL career by any means, but he absolutely lit it up in college. 2-time first team All-American, 2-time first team All-ACC, ACC Rookie of the Year, and he's likely to be a college football Hall of Famer. And on top of that, he was an integral part of the Chiefs winning their first Super Bowl in over 50 years. Other Clemson wide receivers include guys like Rod Gardner and Jerry Butler. When you look at Clemson's active NFL wide receivers right now, you can see why they can call themselves wide receiver U. No, they aren't on the same level as the 3 schools that are ahead of them, but when these wide receivers right here have 6 Pro Bowls, 5 All-Pros, 8-time All-ACC, and a 2-time All-American, it's impressive nonetheless. And that's why I have Clemson ranked number 4 on my wide receiver U ranking. Ranked number 3, and this might be a surprise to some of y'all, but I have the Ohio State Buckeyes. Now, I have good reasoning behind why I have them ranked at number 3, so let me explain. Remember that this is the criteria that I have these rankings loosely based on, and Ohio State just doesn't have the quality of wide receivers that the top 2 teams have. But don't get it twisted though, Ohio State definitely has dogs, and let's talk about them dogs right now. The best Ohio State wide receiver in the NFL right now is Terry McLaurin. And Terry McLaurin has been great so far in the NFL. He's one of those rare players that's way better in the NFL than he was in college. In 4 seasons, he already has a Pro Bowl, 300 catches, 4,200 receiving yards, and 21 receiving touchdowns. What makes his numbers so impressive is that these are the quarterbacks that he's been playing with. 10 different quarterbacks in 4 years is crazy to me. Rest in peace, Haskins, though. Next Ohio State wide receiver that we need to talk about is Garrett Wilson. Garrett Wilson only has 1 year in the NFL, but he did win Offensive Rookie of the Year in that 1 year. And he put up over 1,100 yards with less than ideal quarterback play. He also was a top 10 pick in the draft while being a 2-time All-Big Ten player. Garrett Wilson definitely has the potential to add to the quality wide receivers that Ohio State has in the league. The next Ohio State wide receiver that we need to talk about is Michael Thomas. Now, when you look at Michael Thomas' resume, it looks insane. Offensive Player of the Year, 2-time first-team All-Pro, 3-time Pro Bowl, led the league in catches twice, led the league in receiving yards, most catches ever in an NFL season, college football national champion. The list goes on. He had the best season of his career in 2019, but it's kind of been like he hasn't played since 2019. In the 3 years since he's won Offensive Player of the Year, he's only played in 10 games. Ohio State may be higher up on the list if Michael Thomas has played in the past couple of years, but he hasn't. Still an incredible resume though. The next Ohio State wide receiver that we have to talk about is Chris Olave. Came out in the same draft class as his teammate Garrett Wilson, and he's on the same team currently as Michael Thomas. Olave, as of right now, has only played 1 year in the NFL, but that 1 year was pretty damn good. 72 catches, over 1,000 receiving yards, and his quarterback play wasn't all that either. On top of the NFL accolades, his college accolades are pretty good as well. 2-time first-team All-Big Ten and 1-time third-team All-Big Ten. The next wide receiver that we have to talk about isn't your typical wide receiver. He's a wide receiver slash running back or running back slash wide receiver in college and in the pros. Curtis Samuel. Curtis Samuel was teammates at Ohio State with Terry McLaurin. Now he's teammates in Washington with Terry McLaurin. Curtis Samuel never has been and probably never will be a wide receiver that'll get 1,100, 1,200, 1,300 receiving yards in a season. But he can do damage in the backfield from the slot and occasionally from outside. In college, Samuel was an All-American, first-team All-Big Ten, and a college football playoff national champion. Ohio State's great receivers all time aren't just all active. They have a lot of past wide receivers that were damn good, like Pro Football Hall of Famer Paul Warfield, Ohio State offensive coordinator Brian Hartline, Pro Football Hall of Famer Chris Carter, juiced up All-Pro David Boston, one of the fastest receivers ever in Joey Galloway, Super Bowl MVP Santonio Holmes, top 10 pick Ted Ginn Jr. And Ohio State is number 3 on this list right now, but I think in the future there's a high chance that they could be number 1 on this list. With guys like Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave continuing to build their NFL resume, with Marvin Harrison Jr., Emeka, and Julian Fleming coming to the league, there's a high chance that Ohio State could be number 1 on this list. But as of right now, the number 2 team has to be the LSU Tigers. And now, I know LSU doesn't have the volume of wide receivers in the NFL as Ohio State does, nor do they have the all-time great wide receivers that Ohio State does. But what did I say at the beginning of this video? This is based on the quality of NFL wide receivers that a team has, with emphasis on the last 5 years. And I don't think any team fits that description better than LSU. And the first wide receiver we have to talk about is Justin Jefferson. And when you take a look at his career accolades so far, they are insane. Offensive Player of the Year, first-team All-Pro, 2-time second-team All-Pro, 3-time Pro Bowl, NFL reception leader, NFL receiving yards leader, college football national champion, second-team All-SEC, most receiving yards per game by anybody ever. That broke Julio's record. This man almost has 5,000 receiving yards, and he's only played 3 years in the NFL already. I don't think we need to talk about Justin Jefferson anymore. It's pretty self-explanatory. The next wide receiver we need to talk about is his college teammate, Ja'Marr Chase. His accolades are crazy as well. NFL Offensive Rookie of the Year, second-team All-Pro, 2-time Pro Bowl, college football national champion, Fred Biletnikoff Award winner, which is given to the best wide receiver in college football, unanimous All-American, and first-team All-SEC. And he has NFL records: most receiving yards in a game by a rookie, receiving yards in the season by a rookie, receiving yards in the postseason by a rookie. And he did this in his first 2 seasons in the NFL. Just like Justin Jefferson, I don't think we need to say anything more about Ja'Marr Chase. Outstanding football player. These 2 LSU wide receivers are arguably the 2 best in the game right now. The next LSU wide receiver that we need to talk about is Odell Beckham Jr. Now, everyone knows who OBJ is. He's probably more famous off the field than he is on the field. But don't get it twisted. This man has been a dog on the field. Super Bowl champion, Offensive Rookie of the Year, 2-time second-team All-Pro, 3-time Pro Bowl, Paul Hornung Award, which is given to college football's most versatile player, first-team All-American and first-team All-SEC. On top of that, he has over 7,000 receiving yards and 56 touchdowns. OBJ has been elite at some points of his career, and he hasn't been elite at some points of his career. But every time he's been on the field, OBJ's been a dog. He was an instrumental part of the Rams winning their Super Bowl in the 2021 season. The next LSU wide receiver that we have to talk about is Dwayne Bowe, Money Bowe. I think a lot of people forget that Dwayne Bowe was an All-Pro in 2010, and he made the Pro Bowl that year. While at LSU, Dwayne Bowe also won a national championship and eventually became a first-round pick. He was Jamarcus Russell's #1 wide receiver at LSU. Money Bowe was definitely a very good wide receiver in the NFL for sure, and didn't have the greatest quarterback play either. The last LSU wide receiver that we're going to have to talk about today is Jarvis Landry. Now, Jarvis Landry hasn't been elite in the league like Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, or Odell Beckham, but he's been a very good player for sure. 5-time Pro Bowl, NFL reception leader for 1 year, second team All-SEC, 713 catches with over 7,000 receiving yards, almost 8,000. There's a lot of LSU fans that believe that Jarvis Landry was better than Odell when they were at LSU together. I don't know if I believe that, but Jarvis Landry is a very good football player. Out of these 5 wide receivers, 4 of them have been all-pros in the NFL, which is crazy to me. LSU also has older wide receivers like Deandre Henderson that were very good in the NFL. But out of these 5 wide receivers, LSU has 14 Pro Bowls, 7 All-Pros, 1 Offensive Player of the Year, 1 Offensive Rookie of the Year, 4-time All-SEC, 2-time All-American, and a 1-time Biletnikoff winner. Did you hear those accolades, bro? I'm sorry, but at this point in time, Ohio State is just not competing with that. But you know who is competing with that, though? The real wide receiver U, the Alabama Crimson Tide. Alabama's definitely ranked #1 in my wide receiver U rankings, and it's kind of not close. Let me explain. Bama has it all. They have the quality NFL wide receivers in the last 20 years. They have the college production over the last 15 to 20 years. They have the all-time wide receivers in the NFL. And they have the quantity of NFL wide receivers in the last 15 to 20 years. And I won't even get a chance to break down all of their wide receivers, because they have guys like Cam Sims, who's better in the NFL than he was at Alabama because he couldn't get on the field due to the wide receivers that were in front of him. Now, the first wide receiver we need to talk about is Julio Jones, one of the all-time greats, future first ballot Hall of Famer, 2-time first-team All-Pro, 3-time second-team All-Pro, 7-time Pro Bowl, led the league in receiving twice, led the league in receptions once, NFL 2010s All-Decades team, BCS national champion, 2-time All-SEC. The list goes on. 903 receptions, 1,300 receiving yards, 63 touchdowns. I don't need to say anything else about Julio Jones. Y'all know who he is. Now, the next Bama wide receiver that we need to talk about is Jaylen Waddle. Now, I know Jaylen Waddle has only been in the NFL for 2 years so far. Waddle already has 2,300 receiving yards and 179 catches. Most receptions ever by a rookie in the NFL season as well. He was also a 2022 Pro Bowl snub. His college accolades are outstanding though. College football national champion, SEC special teams player of the year, SEC freshman of the year, 2-time first team All-SEC. And yes, I said 2-time first team All-SEC because we know he would have made first team All-SEC if he didn't get hurt in 2020. Now, the next Bama receiver that we have to talk about is his teammate Devonta Smith. Smith and Waddle were both teammates at Alabama together for 3 seasons. And Smith is definitely the more accomplished college football player. 2-time college football national champion, had the game-winning catch in the championship in 2017, and had a dominant all-time great first half in 2020. Heisman Trophy Award winner, Maxwell Award winner, Walter Camp Award winner, Biletnikoff Award winner, Horning Award winner, college football player, the list goes on. He's also been very good in the pros as well. Over 2,100 receiving yards so far in 2 seasons is pretty damn good. The next Bama receiver that we need to talk about is Amari Cooper. Amari Cooper is an all-time great college football wide receiver and a pretty good NFL receiver. If you take a look at his resume, he's a 4-time Pro Bowler. He was named to the All-Rookie team. He won a national championship. He won the Biletnikoff. He was a unanimous All-American, first team All-SEC and SEC Offensive Player of the Year with 595 receptions and over 8,200 receiving yards. That's already a pretty good career, and Cooper's only 29 years old. On the next Bama wide receiver we have to talk about is Calvin Ridley. Yeah, I know Calvin Ridley missed a year because of the gambling, but if you look at his accolades, he's an All-Pro, 2-time national champion, freshman All-American, first team All-SEC, and second team All-SEC, with 3,300 receiving yards and 248 catches so far in his NFL career. The last time we seen Calvin Ridley play a full season, he was one of the best in the game. The last active Bama wide receiver that we're going to talk about is Jerry Jeudy. Now, Jerry Jeudy isn't on the level of a Devonta Smith, a Jaylen Waddle, a Julio Jones, or a Calvin Ridley. But Jerry Jeudy has been a decent player in the NFL. But what made Jerry Jeudy so important to talk about in this video is his college accolades. College football national champion, Biletnikoff Award winner, consensus All-American, and two-time first-team All-SEC. That, on top of being a decent NFL player, we gotta talk about him in this video. But what made Alabama the clear-cut #1 for me are their all-time wide receivers, like Don Hutson. Now, I never got to see Don Hutson play because he played in the 30s and the 40s. But growing up as a football fan, I always heard that Don Hutson was the original GOAT wide receiver before Jerry Rice. Now, the next Alabama all-time great receiver that we have to talk about is technically not even a receiver, but he played wide receiver at Alabama, and that's Ozzie Newsome. Ozzie Newsome is a Pro Football Hall of Famer and a College Football Hall of Famer. These two players definitely confirmed to me that Bama is really wide receiver U. Out of all of the schools that we talked about on this video, Bama hit each criteria the most. Bama has the quality of NFL receivers in the last 20 years. They have the college production in the last 15 to 20 years. They have the all-time wide receivers in the NFL like Don Hutson and Ozzie Newsome. And then they have the quantity of NFL receivers in the last 15 to 20 years. So I think it's safe to say that Bama is the real wide receiver U. If you disagree, make sure you let me know in the comment section. If I missed any teams, if any teams should be moved around, if I should take some teams off, just let me know in the comments. I'm glad to have a discourse with anybody that comments in the comment section. But anyways, it's Reezy here with the Reason Sports Rap. Make sure y'all like the video, make sure y'all comment on the video, make sure y'all subscribe to the channel, and click on the post notification bell too. If you like college football videos like this, then I suggest you watch this video right here. College position rooms that were loaded with NFL talent.